Welcome back everyone. This is video number 3, easy explanation of the short story The Sound Machine written by Roald Dahl. In the previous video, I had stopped here. It was 6 in the morning. Please take out page number 108. We see that Klausner placed the machine on the ground close to the trunk of the tree. Early next morning, Klausner tries his sound machine on a tree at his neighborhood park. The setting is now a neighborhood park. He put the earphones on his head and switched on the machine. He listened for a moment to the faint, familiar humming sound of the machine. Then he picked up the axe, took a stance with his legs wide apart, and swung the axe as hard as he could at the base of the tree trunk. The blade cut deep into the wood and stuck there, and at the instant of impact he heard a most extraordinary noise in the earphones. This is important. It was a new noise, unlike any he had heard before. And what kind of a noise is it? A harsh, noteless, enormous noise, a growling, low-pitched, screaming sound, not quick and short like the noise of the roses. This is a different kind of a noise, but drawn out like a sob, lasting for fully a minute, loudest at the moment when the axe struck, fading gradually fainter and fainter until it was gone. Klausner stared in horror. What is his reaction? He stared in horror at the place where the blade of the axe had struck into the wood flesh of the tree. Then gently he took the axe handle, worked the blade loose and threw the thing on the ground. With his fingers he touched the gash, the open wound that the axe had made in the wood, touching the edges of the gash, trying to press them together to close the wound, and he kept saying, "Tree, oh tree, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but it will heal fine." Early next morning, Klausner tries his sound machine. We all know this. He switches on the machine, plugs in his earphones on his head, and then strikes the tree at its base with an axe. As soon as the blade cuts the tree, he hears a new sound, unlike the one that came from flowers. This time the cry is harsh and low-pitched and fills Klausner with a sense of horror at the pain he felt he had inflicted on the tree. Extremely regretful about his action, he apologizes to the tree, and then let's see what happens. For a while he stood there with his hands upon the trunk of the great tree. Then suddenly he turned away and hurried off out of the park, across the road, through the front gate and back into his house. He went to the telephone, consulted the book, dialed the number and waited. He held the receiver tightly in his left hand and tapped the table impatiently with his right. He heard the telephone buzzing at the other end, and then the click of a lifted receiver and a man's voice. Whose voice is it? A sleepy voice saying, "Hello, yes." So, this is Dr. Scott. "Dr. Scott," he said. "Yes, speaking." "Dr. Scott, you must come at once. Quickly, please. Who is it speaking?" "Klausner here, and you remember what I told you last night about my experience with sound and how I hoped I might?" Klausner runs off to call Dr. Scott, asking him to come urgently to the garden. Klausner's sense of urgency. Yes, of course, but what's the matter? Are you ill?" "No, I'm not ill, but it's 6:30 in the morning," the doctor said, "and you call me, but you're not ill. It's strange. Please come quickly. I want someone to hear it." "Hear what?" "It's driving me mad. And I can't believe it. Unbelievable." Supposedly a breakthrough. The doctor heard the frantic, almost hysterical note in the man's voice, the same note he was used to hearing in the voices of people who called up and said, "There's been an accident." "Come quickly," he said slowly. "You really want me to get out of bed and come over now?" Let's turn the page and read. Yes, now, at once, please. All right then, I'll come. Klausner sat down beside the telephone and waited. He tried to remember what the shriek of the tree had sounded like, but he couldn't. He could remember only that it had been enormous and frightful, and that it had made him feel sick with horror. The reaction, sick with horror. He tried to imagine. So this is the theme of appearance versus reality, illusion versus reality. Is this a mere figment of his imagination, or has something happened for real? He tried to imagine what sort of noise a human would make if he had to stand anchored to the ground while someone deliberately swung a small sharp thing at his leg so that the blade cut in deep and wedged itself in the cut. Same sort of noise perhaps? No, quite different. He compares perhaps the pain felt by the tree and the pain that a human being will feel if somebody hurts him. The noise of the tree was worse than any known human noise because of that frightening, toneless, throatless quality. He began to wonder about other living things. And he thought immediately of a field of wheat standing up straight and yellow and alive. So plants and trees have life, with the mower going through it, cutting the stems, 500 stems a second every second. Klausner starts feeling concerned about the exploitation of nature. Oh my God, what would the noise be like? 500 wheat plants screaming together, and every second another 500 being cut and screaming. And no, he thought, I do not want to go to a wheat field with my machine. I would never eat bread after that. But what about potatoes, cabbages, carrots, onions? And what about apples? No, apples are all right. They fall off naturally when they are ripe. Apples are all right if you let them fall off instead of tearing them from the tree branch. But not vegetables, not a potato for example. A potato would surely shriek, so would a carrot and an onion and a cabbage. But human beings do need all these things, fruits, vegetables, in order to survive. As human beings, can we avoid harming plants and trees? This is a question we all need to contemplate on. He heard the click of the front gate latch, and he jumped up and went out and saw the tall doctor coming down the patch like little black bag in hand. Well, the doctor said, well, what's all the trouble? Come with me, doctor, I want you to hear it. I want you to hear it, the purpose of his visit. I called you because you are the only one I have told. He has not divulged the secret of his project, his invention, the theory to anyone else. It's over the road in the park. Will you come now? The doctor looked at him. He seemed calmer now. There was no sign of madness or hysteria. He was merely disturbed and excited, the suppressed excitement and disturbed. They went across the road into the park, and Klausner led the way to the great beech tree at the foot of which stood the long black coffin box, foreshadowing of the machine and the axe. The axe is instrumental in bringing about the destruction of the black coffin box of the sound machine. Why did you bring it out here? The doctor asked. I wanted a tree. There aren't any big trees in the garden. And why the axe? You will see in a moment. But now please put on these earphones and listen. You will have to listen. Listen carefully and tell me afterwards precisely. what you hear. I want to make sure. He wants to confirm his hypothesis. He wants to come to a conclusion, and then he will present the findings. Upon his arrival, Klausner demonstrates the working of the sound machine to Dr. Scott, asking him to listen to the sound coming from the earphones plugged into the machine as he strikes the tree. He implores the doctor to do as he asked him to do so, and assures him that the sound that he had heard is truly coming from the tree and not something he had imagined. The doctor smiled and took the earphones and put them over his ears. Klausner bent down and flicked the switch on the panel of the machine. Then he picked up the axe and took his stance with his legs apart, ready to swing. For a moment he paused. "Can you hear anything?" He said to the doctor. "Can I what?" "Can you hear anything?" "Just a humming noise of the machine." Klausner stood there with the axe in his hands, trying to bring himself to swing, but the thought of the noise that the tree would make made him pause again. The tree is going to feel the pain again. "What are you waiting for?" the doctor asked. "Nothing," Klausner answered, and then he lifted the axe and swung it at the tree. And as he swung, he thought he felt. Again, illusion and reality. He thought he could swear he felt a movement of the ground on which he stood. He felt a slight shifting of the earth beneath his feet, as though the roots of the tree were moving underneath the soil, but it was too late to check the blow, and the axe blade struck the tree and wedged deep into the wood. Though hesitant at first, the doctor complies with Klausner's wishes as he sees the thought driving Klausner, excited and almost disturbed. However, just as the blade of the axe strikes the tree, a branch breaks off and falls, nearly crushing both the doctor and Klausner. Let's continue reading. At that moment, high overhead, there was the cracking sound of the wood splintering and the swishing sound of leaves brushing against each other, and they both looked up. And the doctor cried, "Watch out! Run, man! Quickly run!" This is ironical. The sound machine is destroyed beyond repair. The doctor had ripped off the earphones and was running away fast in order to save his life, but Klausner stood spellbound, staring up at the great branch, 60 feet long at least, that was bending slowly downward, breaking, cracking, splintering at its thickest point where it joined the main trunk of the tree. We can almost visualize the situation. The branch came crashing down and Klausner leaped aside just in time. It fell upon the machine, the foreshadowing. From the very beginning, the readers know that the machine is doomed. The outcome of the result is not going to be a satisfactory one, perhaps. It fell upon the machine and smashed it into pieces beyond repair. "Great heavens!" shouted the doctor as he came running back. "That was a near one. That was a close save. I thought it had got you." This part is an example of irony. Klausner was staring at the tree. His large head was leaning to one side, and upon his smooth white face there was a tense, horrified expression. Slowly he walked up to the tree and gently he prized the blade loose from the trunk. "Did you hear it?" Still now he is preoccupied with the noise. He said, turning to the doctor. His voice was barely audible because of his tensed and nervous nature. The doctor was still out of breath, panting for breath from the running and the excitement. "Hear what?" He is least interested. "In the earphones. Did you hear anything when the axe struck?" The doctor began to rub the back of his neck. Klausner has to depend on the version given by Dr. Scott if he wants to confirm his theory, if he wants to come to a conclusion. But the doctor is least interested. He is grateful that his life is saved. Both of them are safe at least. Well, he said, as a matter of fact, he paused and frowned and bit his lower lip. No, I'm not sure. I couldn't be sure. I don't suppose I had the earphones on for more than a second after the axe struck. It all happened within a few minutes or within a few moments, in fact. It is almost impossible for someone to be so careful about something at such a crucial point of crisis. Yes, but what did you hear? I don't know, the doctor said. I don't know what I heard. Probably the noise of the branch breaking. Frightened and alarmed on having just escaped a serious accident, the doctor tries to leave the place, but is opposed by Klausner, who keeps insisting him to make certain that he had heard the tree scream. To his dismay, the doctor tells him that he was hardly able to make out any sound in the commotion caused by the branch falling upon them. Now, Klausner is completely distraught and is filled with empathy for the extreme pain he believes to be felt by the trees and plants as humans thoughtlessly cut them. He was speaking rapidly, rather irritably. He is now getting irritated. What did it sound like? Klausner leaned forward slightly, staring hard at the doctor. Exactly what did it sound like? Oh hell, the doctor said, I really don't know. I was more interested in getting out of the way. This is the practical thing to do at such a moment of crisis. Let's leave it. Dr. Scott, what did it sound like? Almost threatening. For God's sake, how could I tell what with half the tree falling on me and having to run for my life? This is Klausner's obsession. The doctor certainly seemed nervous. Klausner had sensed it now. He stood quite still, staring at the doctor, and for fully half a minute he didn't speak. The doctor moved his feet, shrugged his shoulders, and half turned to go. Well, he said, we would better get back. Look, said the little man, and now his smooth white face became suddenly suffused with color. Look, he said, you stitch this up? He pointed to the last gash that the axe had made in the tree trunk. You stitch this up quickly. Don't be silly, the doctor said. You do as I say. Stitch it up. Klausner was gripping the axe handle and he spoke softly in a curious, almost a threatening tone. But we know he is harmless. According to Mrs. Saunders, he is harmless. It's just his obsession and his preoccupation with his project that makes him so obstinate and perhaps a little bit threatening. Don't be silly, the doctor said. I can't stitch through wood. Come on, let's get back. So you can't stitch through wood? No, of course not. Have you got any iodine in your bag? What if I have? Then paint the cut with iodine. It will sting, but that can't be helped. Now look, the doctor said, and again he turned as if to go. Let's not be ridiculous. So Klausner's behavior is pretty irritating as well as ridiculous. Let's get back to the house and then paint the cut with iodine. Authoritative. Klausner is insisting and Dr. Scott has to obey him. The doctor hesitated. He saw Klausner's hands tightening on the handle of the axe. He decided that his only alternative was to run away fast, and he certainly wasn't going to do that. All right, he said, I'll paint it with iodine. He got his black bag, which was lying on the grass about 10 yards away, opened it and took out a bottle of iodine and some cotton wool. He went up to the tree trunk, uncorked the bottle, tipped some of the iodine onto the cotton wool, bent down and began to dab it into the cut, dressing the wound. He kept one eye on Klausner, who was standing motionless with the axe in his hands, watching him. "Make sure you get it right in." "Yes," the doctor said. "Now, do the other one." Then one just above it. The other did as he was told. The wounds, the pain inflicted on the tree by Klausner in order to prove his theory. What can we conclude from this? Even Klausner, who is so concerned about the pain felt by trees and plants, had to inflict pain on them in order to test his theory. In order to discover something, in order to make an invention, scientists at times have to do things which go against nature. This is also a point which we need to think about. "There you are," he said, "it's done." He straightened up and surveyed his work in a very serious manner that should do nicely. Klausner came closer and gravely examined the two wounds. "Yes," he said, nodding his huge head slowly up and down. "Yes, that will do nicely." He stepped back a pace. "You will come and look at them again tomorrow." "Oh yes," the doctor said. He had no other choice. "Of course, and put some more iodine on, if necessary." "Yes." "Thank you, doctor," Klausner said, and he nodded his head again, and he dropped the axe, and all at once he smiled, relieved. A wild, excited smile, and quickly the doctor went over to him and gently he took him by the arm and he said, "Come on, we must go now." And suddenly they were walking away, the two of them, walking silently, rather hurriedly across the park, over the road, back to the house. Devastated by the utter insensitivity of mankind, Klausner is also filled with remorse and guilt of this realization. In a state of frenzy, he asks the doctor to heal the tree's wounds and apply iodine on it, maybe as a means to absolve himself from some guilt and to undo some of the wrong that he had caused the tree. Thus, satisfied with helping the tree, Klausner is somewhat relieved, and the story ends with him asking the doctor to keep a check on the tree's recovery. Thus, the story powerfully conveys the message of being mindful of our exploitation of nature. The actions of Klausner may seem absurd to others, but his actions are definitely based on the idea of empathy, which many individuals lack in relation to the environment. The sound machine, therefore, is both a science fiction as well as environmental ethics. Do check the description box for the descriptive questions and answers.